Never knew that I was crippin'. If a gets a trippin', I'm alright. That's a great song. Amazing. From the heart, from the soul, like today's video. What is up, and welcome back, everybody. I want to hold this in my hand. Kind of like today's amazing episode, full of passion, full of love, not really full of crippin'. Top 5 drift chassis that people are kind of sleeping on at the moment. Welcome to today's episode of Friday Talks, everybody. Dude, I am so shot. It's unbelievable, bro. I'm so brain rotted. I need therapy. Okay, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's channeling. Today we're talking about the top 5 drift chassis that are kind of slept on. People don't really look at these cars as like possible drift cars because they don't fit the quote-unquote drift niche, for lack of better terms. In reality, these cars make amazing platforms. The parts are super easy to get. And at the same time, they're rear-wheel drive. Some of them are solid axles. Some of them have IRS, which, for those of you that don't know, means independent rear suspension. It took my dyslexic self about 2 months to figure that out when I first heard it like 7 years ago. And these cars, some of them are not slept on. I feel like some of them are known to be drift cars, and at the same time, some of them aren't truly appreciated. So without further ado, let's get started on today's episode with number 1, a car that I have suggested to many people and have been flamed and roasted for doing so, the SN95 Mustang. Ladies and gentlemen, when you think of America, you think of 3 things. That Twisted Tea video where the dude got smacked into the next century with a can of Twisted Tea. Funny compilations of people getting arrested in Miami on summer break. And the Ford Mustang GT, baby. Yee freaking yee. The SN95 Mustang is one of the best chassis, in my opinion, to start drifting with because, number 1, they're cheap. They are dirt cheap. You can go out and have $5K right now and get a pretty reliable Mustang GT, an SN95 Mustang. It may need some work, but you could get a manual SN95 Mustang that's, got some dented bumpers, some dented fenders, but who really cares? Because it's a drift car at the end of the day. Aside from the price, what really makes the SN95 Mustang a great car for drifting is parts are available everywhere. When you're out there on track, you have no idea how obnoxious it is to break apart and know that you have to either A, be lucky to find it in the parts store that's, about 5 miles away, or B, you're going to have to wait a week to get the parts in. With American muscle cars, with a car like the SN95, if something goes wrong, something that you can address and fix, something that wasn't customized on the motor, something that's pretty straightforward, dude, most of the time you could run down to your local auto parts store to get it. If, let's say, your diff blew out and you're at like a 4-day track event, you hop on Facebook Marketplace. Somebody is selling either an LSD or an open diff. I don't know if those two are compatible, if you could put the open diff onto a Mustang GT, but you could definitely find an LSD diff and figure something out to get you going through the rest of that drift event. With cars like mine, with JDM cars, with things like 240Zs, with things like E30s, E46s, E36s, with those kind of, not really, kind of, but, non-American cars, non-domestic cars, it's hit or miss. Like when I blew my brake lines at the track, I didn't have braided brake lines yet, and I was possibly going to have to get towed home. I was lucky that the AutoZone down the street was like a distributor for the AutoZones in like that general area in southern Jersey or central Jersey. And they happen to have two left, and I copped both of them. I'm like, I don't know if the other one's going to blow up on my way home. So the SN95 is a great choice for those that are looking for something that looks like an S chassis. If you squint your eyes for it hard enough, something that looks cool. Let's be honest, the SN95 is a timeless American vintage design and something that can make power easily. Like, those things are torquey. You're not going to have an issue drifting with that solid axle. It's something that you can easily get into for dirt cheap, and you can find parts everywhere. So consider the SN95. Number two, and I mentioned this, this chassis, despite it being like, the stereotypical car, I mentioned this chassis for the sole fact that in the next 10 years, this car is going to be the new S chassis. This car will be a chassis that everybody's going to say, oh, you actually kept it clean. Oh, look, sick. He's been drifting it for that long. Oh, sick. Look, he swapped this, and this into it. And that is the FRS, the GT80, the GR86, and the BRZ. That chassis, I remember when it first came out, I had some people around me at that time, and I said, this is going to be like the chassis to have. Like, I regret buying my E30 knowing that I could have bought one of these for dirt cheap with like a blown motor or something. I could have bought one of these that's like been in a front end collision for nothing. Like, I could have hopped on Copart and got one for next to nothing and swapped something crazy in it. The early models I did hear had some issue with like rear end rigidity, like in the rear section of the chassis. I don't recall what exactly it was, but I'm sure in the aftermarket, well, I'm not sure, I know in the aftermarket there are some reinforcement support mods that you can put in there, especially if you decide to swap things like a 2JZ, an RB26, or my favorite, the LS platform. Yes, if you're in America and you have that car and you want to upgrade in power and you want to motor swap it, just get an LS. And I know it's something that seems like it's common, like, oh, just get an LS. You know how expensive that is? You know how expensive it is to have a broken 2JZ? You know how expensive it is to have a broken RB? If you want to K-swap it, go ahead and K-swap it. I will never tell somebody not to do a K-swap in a car. But if you're drifting, you want that torque. You want that thing to be, really, really barking at you to go sideways. And I've seen those things in the 4-cylinder, the Boxer 4-cylinder that they got right now. I've seen them shred. I mean shred. They're low on power. They're light. They're exciting. You don't have to swap them. If, let's say, inevitably when you do blow up that motor and you don't want to put another Boxer in it, the possibilities are endless. I've seen so many different motors in that car. It's honestly impressive. And that's what I'm saying by that will be the car that people will look at and say, wow, he actually kept it clean. Wow, it's not a clapped out one. Wow, that one's tastefully modded. Wow, that one is a great drift car. It's a Japanese chassis. It's a Japanese car. It's rear wheel drive. It's light. It's the modern day S chassis. Let's all be honest here. You don't need a 240. You don't need an S15. You don't need an S14. You don't need an S13. You don't need any of these cars. If you're trying to get into drifting and you want a Japanese car, I would do either the FRS, the GR86, or the BRZ, and I would stay on that stock motor for as long as possible. And if it blows up or you want more power, look at your swap options. And like I said, the LS, if you're going to swap a motor, the LS is the best option because it's cheap. They're everywhere. The most expensive part is the swap. Like, if you're going to spend that money, just go with something where if something breaks, you can stop by your local auto parts store and get something for it. That's unless you go like insane, LS build. But in most cases, if you try to keep it as stock as possible. So going into German cars, E90, E92. Yes, the E9X, the E90, E92, E93 platform. In my opinion, I've seen these things drift. I've seen them do an amazing job, but in particular, the 330 or 328 eyes. Do not get a 335 unless you want to have headaches. Why the 330 and the 328 eyes? Because number one, they're NA, they're reliable. You don't have to deal with all the issues that come with the N55. I know people are not going to like what I have to say about that, but those who have built those cars know that they can be difficult. Those motors can be, they are somewhat of a hassle to maintain. The NA variant of these cars, which is the 330i and the 328i, are incredibly reliable. They got a good amount of torque. It's one of the last NA straight sixes that BMW came out with. Sounds great, in my opinion, with a tasteful exhaust put on it. And the E90, E92, E93 chassis, in that variant, they're pretty cheap. The bar to entry on them is not insanely high. The only downside to a car like that is possibly struggling to find parts. But being that there are so many of them, being that they're relatively new, they're not exactly an old car, you'll most likely be able to find parts at the auto parts store if you break down on track. Another advantage of the E90, E92 is, dude, the interiors are nice. They're comfortable. You can get them with a nice sound system. They come in a manual variant. It's not something that you have to go, all out for to swap and do all these crazy things. If you get the 4-door, E90s, dude, you got rear seats. So you're in a drift car with rear seats. And the aftermarket is it actually heavily supports these cars. They support these chassis with angle kits, camber caster and tow kits, and with so much more. I mean, like, this was a chassis that was raced, not necessarily the motor, but the chassis itself was and still is used in motorsport. So it's something that's been studied. It's something that's reliable. If you have an issue, you're able to find, solutions to them on Facebook forums and forums in general. If you blow up the motor, dude, I saw a 2JZ swapped one once, bro. Oh my God, that thing was incredible. But like I said, try to stay away from the crazy motor swaps. Try to keep it NA. Try to keep it basic. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Number 4 on our list is another American car. American muscle, baby. And when you think of this car right here, you're thinking Need for Speed. You're thinking Turkey or Drift. You're thinking Von Gittin Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, the S195 Mustang GT, baby. You got about 400 horsepower in that bad boy. 6-speed manual. I think it still came with the Charlotte axle. Pretty sure it still came. Let me load that up real quick right there. Hold on. S197. Charlotte rear axle. That Johnny still came with the Charlotte rear live axle, baby. There's solutions to that too. And the good part is you don't got to swap that bad boy. That bad boy right there, you can put a Pro Charger kit on it. I've seen them supercharged. I've seen them have a number of modifications on that bad boy, and they have the ability to go sideways like no other American car. None of them JDM cars can keep up with old reliable right there. All right, enough of that. The S197 Mustang is not only a reliable V8, it not only has a decent interior, it not only has incredible classic timeless looks, it's also a pretty badass chassis. The bar to entry for a chassis like that is higher than the rest of the cars that were on my list. But if you got a little more money to spend, you want a little more horsepower, you don't want to swap anything, like you just want a car you can hop in and go. You want a chassis that's been tested and proven, and so many other people, including Mr. Von Gittin Jr. right here, dog. Okay, I gotta stop. Including Von Gittin Jr., who in 2005 won a D1 GP win in the 2010 Formula Drift Championship in the S197 Mustang. All right, I gotta chill out. So, Obviously, everybody knows uh, RTR, Von won, 2010 drift competition in that chassis, and I think 2005 as well. I don't recall the exact dates, but there's a level of badassery and lineage to this car in drifting. If you pull up with one of these cars, you're gonna get attention. They're loud, they're fast, they're decently reliable. They have a nice interior, in my opinion. They have a pretty decent interior. On top of that, you're not gonna get bored in this thing. The aftermarket is there, and again, like with the other American cars, like with the other domestic cars on my list, you could get parts anywhere. If you go to a track on a Friday and something breaks, you could go to the Ford dealership, dude. You could go to AutoZone. You don't have to wait online, especially if you keep that engine in its stock, you know, platform. You just do as many like bolt-on NA mods as possible and try to keep it as stock as possible, because contrary to belief, you don't need an insane amount of power to drift. You're gonna have the time of your life. You're really going to enjoy yourselves. And I've seen these things drift in person, and they handle pretty well. I'm sure it takes some getting used to with that live axle in the rear, but I'm always a supporter for American cars and drifting. I think it's truly a badass combination, and I truly think American cars are slept on in that regard. Let me just crack my neck right quick. Last but not least, baby, nothing screams America. Nothing screams America like this one right here. You thought I was a Ford? You thought I was a Ford fanatic? I like Ford, but I also drive a Chevy Equinox as my daily driver. Ladies and gentlemen, the 5th gen Camaro, baby. Nothing beats LS power, LS reliability, LS passion. The sound, the explosiveness, the fact that you think you're inside a transformer. Imagine you bought a yellow 5th gen Camaro. All right, bear with me here. This is the incentive for the 5th gen Camaro right here. Imagine you bought a yellow 5th gen Camaro. All right, you pull up to the track. You're like, yo, I've been working on this thing like a madman the past few months. I've been busting my back bottom to really get this car going, to really hone this car in. I've been hitting up Chris at E-Town to get private days, test days. I've been going to the local Masana Al Karasi to practice. I've been going to, Bunker Hill and Patterson. I've been doing so much. And now it's finally my time to shine. And you pull up in this Mustang, in this 5th gen Camaro, right? You rip that hydro, dog. Do your little Swedish flick. Pull the hydro. And all of a sudden, Megatron comes out of the horizon. And your car starts beeping and booping, dog. Beeping and booping. This thing goes blip, 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 blip. And then it just transforms. And it spits you out on the track. And you realize you built a drift. You built a drift transformer, bro. You built a drift transformer, dog. That's like the number one incentive, is you could possibly buy Bumblebee from Transformers. And next thing you know, you're getting hit up by like Adam LZ. You're getting hit up by like, all these car magazines. You're getting hit up by like, I don't know who else. The RTR team. You're getting hit up by, autotrader.com. You're getting hit up by, the U.S. government. You're getting hit up by, the FBI, the CIA, the Homeland Security. You're getting hit up by, 3-letter organizations, the CIA. You're getting chased after by MI8 in Liverpool because you're on the run with your car and you're on this ultimate mission to prove that, Optimus Prime is still alive. And look, a lot of stuff can happen with the possibility of drifting a transformer. But at the end of the day, this car, practically speaking, is rear-wheel drive. It's reliable. It's dependable. You have an LS. And like I said, with all the other American cars, if it breaks down anywhere, if you have any issues on track, you're not stuck. You can go to the Chevy dealership. You can go to any auto parts store and get yourself out of there. The LS is a reliable, time proven, race proven platform. It's an engine that is timeless. It sounds timeless. It has endless aftermarket support. And you can get angle kits for all of these cars for a decent price. The interior on the fifth gen Camaro, it's debatable with how nice it is. It's got blind spots like crazy, but if you're lucky enough to get the Bumblebee one that transforms, you don't really have to worry about that. But at the end of the day, the fifth gen Camaro is, kind of a slept on chassis. It's a little more expensive, kind of like, the S197 Mustang. The bar to entry is a little higher. If something does break, it's a little more expensive. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, compared to something like the FRS, the BRZ, the GR86, or the GT86, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, or something like the SN95 Mustang, you don't have to swap anything. Like, practically speaking, like, the biggest issue is power with a lot of these other cars. And with something like the S197 Mustang or the fifth gen Camaro, you don't have to worry about swapping anything. You got a big V8 in there. You got a lot of torque. You probably never are going to want to swap anything. You're probably going to keep the thing as stock as possible with just bolt-on mods. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to get into drifting, I see a lot of people make the mistake. I talk to a lot of people about it. Like, look, I'll be honest with you. I haven't drifted in 3 years. Everybody knows, things happened back home in the motherland, and I wasn't mentally well. So there was that. So, but, people come up to me, people that I work with, people that I'm around, people that I'm at the gym with, friends of friends, and they find out I'm into cars, or they find out I'm into drifting, or they see me pull up in the E30 and, they're asking why, it's cambered like that, why the wheels got like a bulldog look in the front and all this stuff. And, begin talking about drifting, and, they're like, I always wanted to get this car, this JDM chassis, and I wanted to like 2J swap it, or I want a 1J swap it, or I want to RB swap it, or I want to LS swap it. I always go to the Mustang. I tell them, get a Mustang. Get an SN95, dude. If you got more money, get an S197. Get a fifth gen Camaro. Stay away from these cars. Like, stay away from the rest, because you're gonna realize you're underpowered. You're gonna want a different car. You're gonna want to start swapping. Or a lot of people don't have much experience with cars and don't understand how intense it can get. Like, you might be working, and how expensive it can get. Like, the money you could spend for swapping an LS into, for example, the BRZ, you could have probably got an S197 Mustang, dude, and put bolt-on mods. You could have had an exhaust on an S197 Mustang. You could have bought maybe 2 sets of rear wheels, so 4 wheels for the rear, cheap Walmart wheels basically, and you could have probably bought like decent front tires and put money towards an angle kit. Like, I'm not saying you could probably afford a full-blown angle kit, but you would have probably covered half the cost of an angle kit. So just try to move smart if you're trying to get into drifting. Try to listen to people that have been in it for a lot longer than me. Look at alternative chassis. Look at things that people aren't really drifting, but make sense to drift, and have the aftermarket to support it. Don't try to get into niche builds as your first car. Don't buy some crazy German car that nobody's ever swapped and nobody's ever did, and then spend, the next 10 years building it and possibly never driving it. Get something that you can get to the track to tomorrow with the minimal amount of effort. These cars are minimal amount of effort cars, except for the SN95, because it's an older chassis. It might need some work to really get reliable. Something like the S197, the 5th gen, even the E90 and E92 are cars that are relatively easy to get to the track with as quickly as possible. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I love you. Hug your mama tonight. Hug your grandmom the next time you see her. Hug your pops. Hug your significant other. Hold them in your arms and tell them that you love them. Hug your kids. Tell them that you love them. Tell them that they matter. because the world's going to become a crazy place. And the world is a crazy place. And your kids need to know that they feel loved at home and cared about and seen. Take your pet, give them a nice pat on the head, let them know that you love them. If it's a cat, let them purr a little bit. If it's a dog, let them wag their tail a little bit. And just be loving people. Stop being pricks. I love y'all. Take care. Happy Friday. Jum'ah Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum.